You're going to hate this introduction. An introduction is, in some ways, similar to an obituary. Stay with me. When you eulogize someone, it's usually someone you care deeply about. Same with this introduction. And when you eulogize someone, you're often saying things they might never say about themselves, offering a kind of truth that's unfiltered and fully seen. Same with this introduction. And because the person being eulogized inevitably contains multitudes, you have to make choices. What matters most? How do you order it? What version of them will help the audience understand what made them special? Same with this introduction. Here's my best shot. Jen Dowda is my friend and someone I deeply admire. We met about 5 years ago, at my request, after I got tired of hearing people in the senior care community gush about how great she was. At the time, I'd grown weary of what I call the senior care origin story, which is often the same and frankly can feel a little disingenuous. So when Jen started to share her story, the kind of do-gooder narrative that I had come to reflexively roll my eyes at, I nearly shut off. But as she explained her vision and her approach, it became clear, as it becomes clear to everyone who meets her, Jen is the real deal. She cares deeply, and she has spent the past 10 years putting her money where her mouth is. Jen founded and runs Dowda Senior Consultants, a firm that's hard to describe without using the word singular. Technically a for-profit business, it operates more like a nonprofit. Jen and her team provide families of older adults with guidance, resources, and expert consulting to navigate the many complexities of aging, especially when it comes to finding the right senior living community. Everything they offer to families is free. They're paid by communities only when a placement is made, but instead of pocketing the profits, Jen reinvests in her team and the broader mission. In doing so, somewhat begrudgingly, Jen has become a central figure in the senior services landscape in Central Virginia and beyond. I like to say she's the most powerful person in our industry, partly because it makes her squirm, but mostly because it's true. She's also a mother of 4, the spouse of a pastor, a lover of the outdoors and of travel. She stays away from caffeine, so just note her energy is all natural. Jen, thanks for helping me launch this project, and welcome to Aging Prepared. That's like super formal. This is not a super
So
formal.
nice.
This is not a super formal venue, but I
Wow.
kind of feel like we needed, like, the folks that come on here need a proper introduction and orientation.
Thank you.
So that's the only thing I prepared. But I did wonder, as a starting question, I wonder, because it's probably worth noting that the concept for this podcast was born in the Aging Prepared workshop that we collaborated to build over the last several years, from the same kind of desire to, and maybe some of the same frustration about families kind of making the same mistakes and being unprepared. And so a lot of people went through that workshop, took advantage of that workshop, and this is kind of version 2, trying to distill what is a lot of information into sort of an internet-friendly, bite-sized platform. But I wondered, I was thinking about this last night, I wonder if you remember, Aging Prepared is maybe still a working title, although it's in a lot of places at this point. But I wonder if you remember the setup on how we got to Aging Prepared. I know we were Ready Care for a while, but the call and response, do you remember, am I leading you somewhere that you remember?
No.
My recollection, tell me if I'm
Okay.
wrong, because I often am, but my recollection is that Aging Prepared was the response to the call of, is your plan, do you have a wait and see plan? Right? So are you waiting and seeing, or are you aging prepared? And it was because when I narrated, and I think you have this experience too, when I listen to someone talk about someone who they are, who's in their sphere, someone they're planning for, someone they're thinking about, when and they don't seem to have a plan. They're just sort of like, well, mom thinks this or dad thinks this, and I'm not sure we can have this conversation, whatever it may be. If I narrate back to them, so if we're being precise, your plan is you're going to wait and see. There's always kind of like that. And so that was kind of one of the inflection points we were trying to get at. Fair? My hope is that I can figure out how to pull from you as many experiences or tidbits of information as you can regurgitate, in an hour or so, that we can put out there and get in front of folks who may be either in this or in advance of it. And so maybe to start, I wonder, what lesson have you either learned or you've been kind of relearned, or has presented itself again to you? Like, what's the lesson of the last couple weeks for you? What's relevant to you in this space, like today?
So the phone call that I was on the way here from Richmond, a woman who has 3 sons, none of whom live here. She lives in Free Union. They want her to move to Westminster Canterbury here. She thought about maybe Cedarfield in Richmond. Their kids are worried about her.
Kids are where?
Like 3
Everywhere.
other states, yeah. All boys. And I said, well, do you want to move there? No. So then we talked the whole way here.
So she called you.
Her financial planner was talking to her son, and he said, you should call Jen to talk about this. So I have to go back and look on the notes because I was driving as far as what the son is, where we're going to have a conversation.
Right.
But I think what keeps coming up is the difference between the adult child and what they want, and the older adult and what they want, and trying to help those people get on that same page. We've been studying a book in our staff called How to Say It to Seniors. There's one thing I can tell an adult child. It's order that on Amazon right now and read it as soon as you can. It's amazing. And so there's a lot of that. Like, you have this agenda and your parents have this agenda, and how can we be successful? And it's so obviously unique to every situation. But there are some patterns and there's some helpful tips in there. But I think we can be empathetic to somebody else, but we don't ever really know what it's like to be someone else. So I think for an adult child, the best that they possibly can to imagine, okay, what does it feel like to be my mom? And she's living in this house, and her husband died 15 years ago, and her dog just passed away. But she loves it. She lives on a farm, and she has friends that she loves. And, they're worried about the future, but what about right now? And she doesn't want to move. And so just this feeling that most older adults have of, you just want to put me somewhere, just so you don't have to worry about me, and you don't have to feel guilty. And there's probably some of that, but there's also a lot of, like those 3 boys, I'm sure, love their mom and want her to be okay. But even we had this whole conversation. Now we've talked about how we're going to find her another dog. But at the end, she's like, would you ever, I know that you're starting to do things in Charlottesville. Would you ever want to come stay with me? I would love for you to come spend the night with me sometime when you're here so you don't have to drive home. So just this feeling, actually, first she asked me if I would be your daughter. But I don't know. I feel like that's what I keep coming up against for caregivers. It can be spouse caregivers, adult children, whoever, doing everything you can to inhabit the body of that person and think, what does life feel like for them, and how can I respect them and help them pull out what it is they're trying to do?
Why don't they defer? So I'm asking a question that has obvious answers, but I just to get myself in that mind frame, why don't they just say, well, mom wants this? It's a super obvious question. Why don't the 3 kids just say, oh, mom's going to stay here, is what she wants?
Because they're worried that either that she's not going to do well, and then they're going to have to deal with it.
Right.
Right.
So she's saying, I don't want to go. They're saying, we got to have a plan.
Yeah. So I told her, I think this is why we did Aging Prepare. That's why we're trying to educate people all the time. They think the only option is to move somewhere like Westminster, Canterbury, or Cedarfield. Like, that's it. That's, if you can afford to do that, that's your only good option. And people don't know all the other options. So in my mind, if you don't want to move somewhere like that, then let's figure out how to keep you in your home as long as possible, with also a plan for if you do need to move at some point. So let's set up plan A and plan B, go down both of those roads, because she made a kind of an offhand comment about, I know it's really hard to get good care in your home. And I was like, okay, well, tell me more about that. She has a long-term care insurance policy. She obviously is well-resourced. And I said, there are really, really good care companies. And she said, oh, really? I said, yeah, just now I'm going to talk to somebody. Oh, that's amazing. So
Do you know, does she, so when she misunderstands what's possible, does she think, oh, there are companies out there that do this, or there are resources out there, but they're not good? Or is it even more basic than that? Is it just like, I didn't really even know this was a...
she thinks they're not good. And she visited her mom, and her mom lived to 107, and she visited her mom in the senior living community she lived in for 20 years somewhere else. And it was horrible. Not like nursing home horrible, just depressing.
Yeah.
And she said, so in my mind, I think once I go to assisted living, then I'm just going to die. So that's the other piece of it, is I want to take her to some communities that feel alive and feel great, for her to see that, realize that's not necessarily what's coming if she does need to move. Also, I told her, about your Ready Care Aging Prepare, the program.
Yeah, Ready Care.
And, I said, I'd love for you to meet those folks, so you have these two different things, roads you could go down, and you can tell your kids, we can get on a Zoom with your kids, whatever. And I think I've done it enough with enough families to see, like, once the sons see there are other options where things could actually go okay for their mom without her moving, then they're like, then that's fine. But when you're coming from two different angles, you're not trying to figure out how, like, you need somebody to help you kind of bridge that gap.
So I view this as a situation where this family is actually on the spectrum. They're seemingly very proactive.
Oh, for sure.
There's no
Yes.
problem right now.
Yes.
And they are thinking about the
Yes,
future.
ahead. Absolutely.
And that is what percentage of families overall? Something very small.
Yes.
I guess I want to invite you to opine on that, on why, in your experience, based on your intuition, why do people put this, like, what are the reasons that this seems to sneak up on so many folks?
I think because people do think that's the only option, that kind of continuing care retirement model. And they think, so either they go ahead and move and do that because they think that's their only option, or they can't afford that, or they don't want to. And so they think that's their only option. So then they just don't want to talk about it and just hope that they're one of the people that dies in their sleep and doesn't ever need care, or that mom's able to do that. And they just, because they just don't think there's anything that could work for their situation. So they just don't want to talk about it.
That's kind of tragic.
And adult children have a hard time seeing their parents aging. The family I toured this morning, it was a son and daughter-in-law, and the son had to leave quickly, and the daughter-in-law came with me to the car and just said, I think they're not dealing with what's actually happening. The sons can't, this is a different situation, but the sons can't see that. And she's like, I can see it. And I think that's a lot of it, is those, not the actual children, their spouses are the most helpful, because they can, any child is still always going to see their mom and dad as mom and dad in a great way that they should, but sometimes it's hard for them to see them aging.
Interesting, because I think it's possible more folks would assume that the adult children might see. I guess I can see it both ways, but I can imagine, like, my mom has passed away, so I think in some ways I have like an oddly objective perspective about this, but my instinct would be more that they would be overly worried and overly critical of the aptitude or the capacity of their loved one, and therefore they would be pushing. But it seems like at least equal to that is the reality that folks are they continue to see their parent through the eyes of like their parent's strength.
Maybe not their strength, but they see them in terms of, because yes, what you said about they undersell what their parents can handle, right? That is definitely true. But I do think, like, I know somebody who I know the parents, the older adults, very well, and then kind of met separately the adult child, him and his wife, and know them. And when the daughter-in-law talks to me about them, I would think, I don't even know who she's talking about. Like, I know them as my friends. Like, they're this older couple, and they're amazing, and they're just incredible people who do all these incredible things. But listening to her talk about them just sounds like they're just this kind of old couple that, they're so hard, and, we're always having to do stuff for them, which they're not. So I think your point of kind of thinking that they're less able to do things for themselves than they really are.
It's interesting, though. It's not an opportunity I've thought about to test your thesis or your experience of your biological parents against your spouse's, to pressure test. I mean, maybe that's something spouses naturally do.
Yeah.
But maybe they're not speaking. I can imagine not wanting to say to my spouse, "Your mom is."
Right.
Like, you're not seeing it.
Right. Yeah. And we're all seeing everything through our own lens. So I think for her, she's got 4 kids, she's overwhelmed, and she's like, oh, your parents are just something I have to deal with, right? Because she's already overwhelmed. For me, I'm like, oh, they're this awesome couple that has lots of time because they're retired and they're fun and I love being with them. And I'm not worried about having to take care of them as they get older. She is, right? She's thinking, I've got these kids and I've got these in-laws.
What kinds of questions do people ask you at lunch? Like, they know that you're in this space, and like, what are the themes? Like, what does everybody hit you with?
What's the best community? Which I always say, there is none. It's the best fit for the person.
Yeah. Explain that.
I mean, just like if somebody asks you what's the best college, there's not a best college.
But
right?
like for the person that doesn't have any concept of where to begin this thinking, like, what are the factors that make a community aligned with someone?
Location in Richmond, especially, there's distinct locations where people will go one side of the river or not. Cost, size, amenities. To me, one of the most important things is just the vibe of the community, just how it feels.
Yeah.
And I think even with college choices, right? Same way, like, where are your people? And so I want to meet somebody and find out, like, who are your people and where are you going to feel comfortable being, which is hard for adult children to do because it's amazing how many times I will tour adult children and they'll say, oh, definitely this. And then if we're able to tour the older adult, they make a different choice because it's hard to know.
Do they not understand what their parents value, or what accounts for that, do you think?
I think it's that they know their parents as their parents. They imagine what they were like when they were kids and it was their parents. And I think I feel like I've already experienced this. I'm a different person than I was when I was 30. There are things I like now that I did not. Like, when I played tennis, I would never want to play doubles. I'd always want to play singles. Now I just want to play pickleball. Tennis is too hard. Or like gardening's boring, or who cares about birds or what? Like, and I'm like, no, I love that now. So I think some of that is just people change, and sometimes the adult children don't really know that.
Do they overvalue the amenities? Like, do they or overvalue the wrong amenities?
I think most senior living companies build buildings for adult children, not for older adults.
Right.
So they fall in love with the bells and whistles. I think children want to do what's best for their parents, and there's always some guilt of having your parents move somewhere that just is. And somehow it makes them feel better if it's gorgeous and has lots of beautiful amenities and has a salt room and a golf simulator and all of the things. And I just don't know anybody in their 90s who really care. I mean, some of that can be fun because now there's something the grandkids and the great-grandkids can do when they come.
Right.
So it's not always meaningless. But you see the difference when you see an adult child, when we come up against somebody who's been somewhere and it didn't fit, and then we meet them and they say, we need to move, Mom. That looks completely different because now they realize what's important and they found out what wasn't important. But you can't tell somebody that the first time.
And can I speculate that it's more about culture and quality of care, less about polish? And, I'll make this case on your behalf or on behalf of all folks that help older adults find places to live. But those are the pieces that you can't find out online.
Right.
To be able to talk about sort of the culture or the leadership, and to be able to stay tuned as those variables maybe change.
Right. What does it really actually feel like to live there?
One of the things that I find people undervalue or don't understand well enough is kind of maybe you wouldn't describe it this way, push back if so, but sort of the in-between solution of moving out of your home but moving into an independent living setting where you can sort of maintain your optionality on care, but you get to defer your responsibility on home maintenance and things like that. Set that up for folks, because I don't do what you do, but like I tend to be a champion for that kind of middle ground.
Yeah. What I tell people, one thing that I love about that situation is if you're moving to somewhere that's just specializing in, it's just independent living, then that's what they're concentrating on. They're concentrating on the food and the, amenity, whatever, the gardens, that's all. So that's their specialty. And then if at some point you need care, then you bring in care from a company where that's all they're doing is just doing care. So they're getting the best care. You're kind of getting all the specialties, right? And bringing them together and doing exactly what you want, rather than moving in somewhere where they're providing everything. I don't know that they can always be as good at each individual thing. You're able to move somewhere where, if it's assisted living, kind of more care, doesn't feel as sometimes alive as some of those independent living communities feel. I think the challenge of it is you're still giving up a lot by moving there. And I think in the next 10, 15, 20 years, the next generation is going to be much more willing to move in there. I think the folks in their 80s and 90s now, a lot of them built the home that they're living in. It's the place they lived forever. They raised their kids. And so moving away from that into anything, regardless of what it looks like, just feels like a loss. But once people do it, if they do move into that independent living space, those are the people who are the happiest. We hardly have anybody who, has any negative feedback from that because they find out, oh gosh, now I don't have to worry about all of those things and I have friends to hang out with and they really enjoy it.
I have had a similar experience. Let's riff on that for a second. That there seems to be a correlation between the folks who are most staunchly against the acceptance of, in my case, it's some care support in their home. In your case, it's relocation and lots of the myriad other ways that you support folks. Those folks tend to often be the sort of the most intense adopters of the thing that they were so against. Is that, am I hearing you say a version of that? Like, how often do you relocate someone that was against it, that kind of started from a place of, I really don't want to do this, and then they move and they say, like, I was right, we shouldn't have moved?
Yeah, I think almost always when people move to the right place, almost always, they're like, we should have done this sooner. This is great. I don't know why we didn't do this before. I can't think of anybody who's like, oh, we should have waited. There are people that, like I said, we come up against who have moved to the wrong place, and then we try to help them get to the right place. But, and not that everybody moves in and everything's smooth right away, but it's incredibly rare that anybody would move somewhere and then think, oh, I wish we hadn't done this. And I think if you do it all along with as much, I love it for anything in life where I can kind of dip my toe in and still pull it back out.
Right.
And so we're trying to help people do that. And sometimes, I mean, I have people who are, we're coming up on our 5th-year anniversary. So who I've been working with since I started, who are still at home, who are, figuring things out. And so I think having somebody guide you, being part of your program, whatever it is where you are thinking and planning, then if and when you do move, or if and when you do bring care in, it's not whiplash. We've been talking about this. And so now it feels right. Now is the right time. So that's why it's so important to plan, so that you don't have to be in whiplash. You're not making a decision in crisis. That never feels good.
Part of my hypothesis is that folks don't really know how to plan for this stage.
Mm-hmm.
And when it comes to relocating to senior living, so many folks are instinctively against it, that they don't want to take that first step,
Mm-hmm.
which is more ascertainable, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I could go and put deposits in. Folks
Mm-hmm.
can kind of intellectualize
Mm-hmm.
that as an option for themselves, but they don't want to.
Right.
But I'm kind of curious, like, if you can help me to articulate the ways that folks can inch forward in planning.
Mm-hmm.
How do you respond to that?
Yeah. I mean, I only know what I know in Richmond and our people. And that's really the motivation behind doing what we do, because we can convince people, if you don't want to move, we don't want you to move. I don't want to move. I want to stay in my home. So if you have somebody advocating for you that you trust, who's telling you the truth and working with you, then you can relax. And then you're able to, oh yeah, I could go see a place. Oh, I could go put something down on the wait list, because anybody else in a community, like the woman that I was talking to, she's like, oh gosh, when you go in for those tours and they're like, oh, you're going to fall, and then you're not going to, it's going to be bad for you. So everybody's trying to
Kind of fear bait.
Yes. And they're all pushing for what they're going to profit from. So
Right.
There's not, a neutral person who might be your doctor definitely has your best interest at heart, but doesn't know this whole space, right? They know their medical space. So the fact that people are afraid to step into that makes sense to me because they are going to step in on a tour and somebody's going to try to convince them to do it. That's why we always go with people, because we're saying, we're just listening. We're just gathering information. And I think if people knew that that was really an option, that they really could actually learn, that somebody from your company could come talk to them about home care, but not make them feel any pressure at all, and just know this is what's available. And then you just go home, and that's why I tell them, we're going to make a plan, we're going to set on the shelf, and then go back to living your life. Because if you spend your whole life worrying, because then there's the other side of people there are some people who are just preparing, like just set up a plan and then go do your thing.
So help. It's a hard question to ask you to do, but help me set this up for folks that have no understanding of kind of the function that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
They know that financial planners help them plan for their resources.
Mm-hmm.
They know that estate planners help them plan their estates. They know that healthcare providers help them plan for their healthcare needs.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's this kind of like, but there's this entire chapter.
Yep.
And who's the resource for that?
Mm-hmm.
And not sadly, part of what complicates that is there are lots of different types of resources that fill in that gap. Like, talk me through that a little.
Yeah, and everybody is representing themselves. And so as any type of salesperson or business owner, obviously hopefully you think what you do is the best, and you're trying to tell people that. There's not really anybody who knows all of the things and is trying to actually figure out what's best for you, right? So like, again, back to the looking for colleges. I think there are people out there who do that, who help people who kind of know about all the colleges, because all you know is where your mom or dad went or where your friends went. So you're not really getting good advice by somebody telling you, oh, you should do this. You need somebody objective who knows all the things to be able to tell you that.
And in our space, who are the people that do that?
So a geriatric care manager is able to help kind of pull all those different pieces together.
Tell me what a senior living placement company does.
Okay. Yeah. So they're familiar with all of the communities. And so when somebody reaches out to them, they hopefully ask them questions. And then if they're doing a good job, they set up those tours, they take them on those tours, kind of help them think through that process. And so they're living in that piece. Typically, they help, get through that process, and then the family chooses and moves, and that's that.
What distinguishes a good senior living placement firm from a less good senior living placement firm?
Yeah, so I think just their involvement in the family and actually doing what's best for the family, not what's best for the placement firm. Some communities don't work with placement firms, and so the best ones would still recommend that community. Some of the ones that are just trying to make as much money as possible wouldn't do that. And, what I feel like is the most important piece that we do is the follow-up with the families once they move in, so that we can advocate for them if they need it. We can help the transition, do whatever. And then we're finding out firsthand from families who are living there what it's actually like to live there. So then we can tell that to the next family that comes along. And so to whatever extent any senior placement company does that, I think the more they do that, the better.
Yeah, and it requires the system to not be transactional, right? The feedback loop is both valuable for the older adults and families, because these are relationships they've developed, and these are people that they've formed trust with, but also what they're sharing informs the system. So
Yes.
to the extent that there's I think it's fairly commonly understood how much a senior living community can change year to year. There was a period a year or two or three ago where it felt like, out of COVID, there was so much turnover. My sense is that's calmed down a touch, but it was, this place on X Avenue was great.
Right.
And then 3 months later, it was a nightmare.
Yep.
And you wouldn't know that from the outside looking in. You wouldn't be able to distill that through Google reviews.
Right.
But if the placement firm who had helped you get there, in its former version,
Right.
had to stay in touch with you to know
Yes.
that things had changed, and then
Yep.
to maybe help you find a new place, but also could help defer other folks, or at least
Right.
inform them.
Yep. And help connect you with families who are actually living in that community. Find that really powerful.
Oh, the relationship piece.
Yeah, so
when you
like
get
if-
established.
Yeah. If, I help you move your dad into somewhere, and then the next person comes along and they're like, what's it really like? I can ask you, would you mind talking to that family? And then they can actually talk to you about it, just like, a parent of a kid in college. What's it really like? You have a kid at UVA. What's that? Tell me about all the things. Kind of like those crazy college Facebook pages. You're not there yet, but it's off the chain. Things that people put on there. But, kind of like that, of just how can we connect families and even provide community among the families who are living in that community. Because it tends to be people only find each other when they're complaining, and we want them to find each other to have community and support each other and be a family.
You've been cranking for a good long time in this space, helping families. What wears you out?
Networking, so I don't do it. I think being in a space with somebody where they think they know better, and they or their loved one are going to suffer because they won't trust me, that's really hard for me. Thankfully, most people do trust us and believe us, and almost everybody has gotten to us some word of mouth, so they do trust us. And but I've gotten a lot pushier as the years have gone on, because when I kind of just step back and let people do things, and then I see what can happen. So now I'll say, you can still do what you want. I'm going to be really honest with you. I'll tell
Right.
people. So I think that's probably a hard thing. And then just communities that are just in it to make as much money as they can. That's really, really hard. There's some great communities, locally owned, that we just love. And in this, I'm more of a local cup versus Starbucks kind of person anyway, but especially now, just there's so investors who are
Gobbling up.
Yeah, and they just don't care. And so even, home care companies, same thing, hospice company, just all across that. It's one thing if it's a car dealership or a restaurant, but I mean, this is actual people's lives that people are dealing with. And so many of these larger, the people in that actual community, there are a lot of people there working there who are in it for the right reasons, but their hands are tied by what they're told they can do and can't do. And that gets me down.
Yeah, that must be so disengaging too.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously to the folks that are working in these spaces, but to you as someone who's trying to sort of create a framework for folks to to know what to do, and that to have those pieces constantly moving on you is tough. What is different to you today than it was when you first got into the business?
I think I have a more confidence that we can change things by doing good. We were joking about this community that we're like, you open another community and we're going to fill it up because you keep doing a really good job. They have a waiting list for staff to work there.
Wow.
And it can be done. So that's part of what I think before I just thought, oh, well, I'll just try to help people as much as I can. And now seeing it, that if people are you can do an excellent job and make your business run really well and also take really good care of people. It actually can be done.
It just gets squeezed out at the margins when you've got these big firms coming in and gulping everybody up. And
if what you're trying to do is make a ton of money for somebody, it's not going to work. But if what you're trying to do is just make a living and run a good company, it can work. It definitely can. And so that's what I'm hoping that we can kind of force the issue for companies to say, if you need to do a better job. And we're going to tell people what's going on and educate people and tell them what they should expect. And, people shouldn't think, oh, all those places are horrible and all the home care companies are horrible and it's just terrible and that's all there is. It's not true. There are people doing good things.
Where are there opportunities? Where are the gaps? I know you have this visions for these small kind of compound style communities. Where can someone who is inclined to be in this space and wants to do it well but wants to make money, where does that live for you?
I think there's something about the socialization piece that I just can't, or not even just socialization, but purpose, right? So that's one thing I see between adult children and their parents. Adult children just want their parents to stay alive. Their parents want to live a real life and have purpose and meaning. And if that means they stay in their home and they fall down the stairs and nobody finds them for 2 days, they're fine with that. The adult children love them and aren't fine with that, right? So that piece. So what is a way that we can help people stay in their home and be safe, but also not just be safe just to live 2 more years, but to actually live their life it's hard because with older population, technology can be more challenging. And I think face-to-face is super important for them to be in the physical presence of somebody else. But what could that look like? Even the center here in Charlottesville, just things that are really meaningful ways that, you're not just staying alive just to stay alive.
Yeah, I like how you phrase that. It's different than the way that I typically do, which is maybe a little more negatively oriented. I try to force the conversation for families around it's okay to accept some risk here. Right? This is your parents get to decide how much risk they want to accept. And you want to foreclose at 100%. You can't move someplace that will foreclose your risk 100%. But you can foreclose at 90% or 80%, but they could still fall and they could still be, and it's that's not necessarily the most productive framing of it. Whereas to say, to anchor in purpose, right? This is what gives me purpose and what gives me joy right now is being here, and I'm willing to accept some of the potential downside for that.
And how can there be some way I just feel so we have in a culture where everybody's busy, nobody has time. we have this whole population that has a lot of time. And then for children, for teenagers, for, whoever it is who could just would love to be, I saw something, I can't remember what it was, about a senior living community where they were bringing kids in for ESL lessons. And they were teaching kids English. Just things like that. Like, how can we have this whole resource of these incredible people with all this time and knowledge and wisdom and love, and then it's just sitting there. Like, how can we connect?
Why? What accounts for that? If you could speculate, what accounts for that?
It's not, people haven't figured out a way to monetize it.
Yeah, good point.
But I think there could be a way, because I think, again, like the family I was just talking to, if they knew that mom could stay home and, even she was talking about having this horse that is old enough now and only, they only do lessons. I'm like, well, great, let's get a bunch of people bringing their kids and do lessons. And those are going to be people that you're going to interact with when they bring them to your house to have lessons. So I think if somebody were creative enough to make it, people would pay to do that, for sure. It would just take creativity, because it has to be, people just want to have, that's the other piece I think that stands in the way, is people want to have something that's going to be scalable and reproducible so easily. If somebody's just willing to just say, okay, in this town or in this community, in this place, I'm going to make something that's going to allow people to thrive in their home as an older adult, even if they can't leave their home. I'm going to bring somebody, I don't know what it would be. But we're trying hard to brainstorm on things like that, because everybody, needs to have a purpose.
What businesses or resources have you run into over the years that you're impressed by, or that you were surprised by? There isn't an institution or an initiative that exists that doesn't try to put themselves on y'all's radar. So, and I know you're generally pretty optimistic about what comes through the door. Mm-hmm. Like, what excites you? What have you seen that excites you?
When I went to the center, everybody told me how great it was, but until I really got there, because of that same
it's the community piece.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very alive.
And with real, to walk in and see there's a, travel agent, that was the first thing I said. I just feel like our culture is so, it's like, oh, well, you're old. You're just kind of done. You don't really want to keep living. So things like that where...
Because there are a lot of senior centers, but not all of them pop. That one pops because of the culture. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it's very vibrant. Mm-hmm. I do wonder about it only probably underscores your point. A lot of the folks, that senior center, the center, is, it has a huge group of folks that go that are younger, older adults. And also older adults. And so it again kind of underscores your point that the mixture of different kind of sub-communities is really compelling.
But I think even if somebody, I'm trying to convince my husband for us to get a pool in our backyard. And I'm saying we could do it as a write-off, because we could teach classes in the pool, and my cousin lives down the street and she can teach swim to little kids. And I'm like, how amazing would that be, right? If you have in the pool and you're doing something where you have older adults in your pool and you're teaching 3-year-olds how to swim. Who wouldn't love that? There's just so many ways to, I know at Westminster Canterbury, they have a nursery that's there, the one in Richmond, at a daycare at Westminster Canterbury, that kind of intergenerational.
Why isn't there more of that?
I don't know.
I'd love to know.
I just, like I said, I think, I don't know. People just need to, because it would have to be so specific. I feel like it has to, or so individualized. I don't know. But the more that I myself am getting older, watching my parents, my husband's parents, all this, and then now I have a grandchild. I think that's why I just keep thinking about it and thinking it's already for me. That's my favorite thing, is to be with her. And even if she weren't my grandkid, it's just great being with little kids. As you get older, you're around them less and less. And what mom wouldn't want to break to be like, hey, could you, hang out with my kid? And And then just that, like, I think we've just become so segmented in our society. We do this and you do this and you do this. And the way that it used to be where, it's kind of more multi-generational, if we could somehow get back to that in maybe even if it's not living, but just and in the afternoon, people do something together.
What I mean, are these when I think of the baby boomers, I think they're 75. They're not 92.
Right.
So what generation, like what do you anticipate? Like, do you have a sense of what how that constituency is going to interact with this life stage differently, similarly to the folks that we've been caring for over the last 10 years?
Yeah. They'll be more tech savvy, right? So they'll have more access to the world,
Right.
that most of our folks don't have as much. I think they will be more willing to let go of some things of the house. They're not going to be as attached to that. But you're right. Like, adult children will think, oh, they need all of this and they don't need as much of that. But I do think the types of things that they want are similar. Like, it just kind of gets a little smaller, right? So maybe you don't have your huge, enormous garden in your backyard, but you still want a space on your patio where you have your flowers. And maybe you have a teenage girl who comes and helps you take care of your flowers, and she does it for an hour after school. And that's it. And that allows you to interact with this young girl, and she gets to have this positive interaction, whatever that is. So I think, but I think everybody kind of slows down, no matter what generation you are, once you get to your 80s and that. And part of that too is, I've met people who are 100 before who are still doing it, and people who are 70 who are like done. But just whenever you kind of get to that point where you're like, yeah, I'm going to slow down and just be here. Folks who are older now, a lot of them were super involved in their churches, and now that they can't kind of be a part of that, that's really hard. Whereas, like, I think people in their 70s now made it through COVID and got in all different kinds of communities virtually. So I'm hopeful that maybe that will help them, but I think we still have to be in person somehow. I don't know. What do you think?
For a long time, I guess I had this perspective of the baby boomers as being sort of kind of rugged individualists, and like whatever the traditional pathway was, they weren't going to follow it. They were kind of contrarian as a posture. And I don't know that I necessarily see that playing out in reality. What I do see, and this is not necessarily responsive to the prompt, but I do see that cohort very desperate to tell their stories, very desperate for an audience. Sounds harsh, but maybe a little lonely and a little bored, and fighting obsolescence in a different way. I think we all fight obsolescence, but something about the way our culture seems to work now really like makes people feel like they're on the outs, and like no one gives a shit about you. You were a have, and so like there's really not a platform for you. Like no one's interested. And something that I try to do in response to that is try to take an interest in folks. I guess I'm making it ultimately what's an obvious point. I'm just kind of seeing it play out for younger, older adults, and thinking, wow, like we used to, I have this relationship with the parents of my friend's parents, or all this whole group of folks.
Right.
And the subject used to be like, what are you, Jeff, doing? And tell me about your family. And because that used to be the thing that was interesting to them.
Right.
And now it's like, I want to, like, this is how I feel about this. And this is like, so again, I might just be describing and observing a natural kind of flip,
Yeah.
but there's a desperation in it that I find painful, and in response, like, I want to do as much to create platforms for folks like for folks that I do admire to share their stories and
Yeah.
to have someone honor them by taking an interest in
Yeah.
what's relevant to them.
Right.
Again, I guess that's has nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's capital C care, but
Yeah, because I think the older adults now, late 80s, 90s, their legacy is their children, their grandchildren. That, like, I feel like that was more cultural, just that, like, that's who they want to talk about. I think when I sit with folks in their 90s or 100s, they want to tell me about their kids, their grandkids, their great grandkids. And I wonder if folks in their 70s
want to talk about themselves.
Yeah, I mean,
They lived through the cameras flipping, right? Like the you can that Jonathan Haidt talks about that in his book, like the sort of the seismic change of like living here versus living here.
Yeah. And not wanting so it's that book that I was talking about, How to Say It to Seniors. It's about legacy. You know, how are you a legacy coach for an older adult? What are you doing to help them understand their legacy and leave that? And I think that just looks different for different generations, but it's still wanting to make sure that what you did matters and that it doesn't disappear with you.
Any good like online resources or things that you read? I just signed my dad up for Storyworth.
Yeah, I was just thinking that when you were saying that about legacy. Yeah.
Which I think is kind of a cool way to prompt him to do some thinking. That I think we all kind of need prompted to do, and not all of it is like painless thinking. So.
Yeah. It can be hard work, and then you're so glad you did it.
Yeah. I know you read a lot of newsletters. Like, what do you read? What's relevant to you?
A lot of what I read and watch, like, as folks giving advice about walking with folks living with dementia. Because I feel like it's more often that a more general thing can apply to a lot more people than,
right.
Some of the things that are just unique, that might apply to you, but not to anyone else. But
Sure.
I feel like, they're just helpful things. So I feel like I'm always trying to gather those and learn more things of how to help support and how to just help support caregivers in general. We did a class at Osher, and we're doing something at LLI, and just what are the ways that we can, what tools can we offer caregivers to do what they're doing better? We're actually, you would love this. Do you know what comedy sports is? It's like improv. And the gentleman and woman who started it in Richmond, I don't know, 30 years ago, are getting into this, kind of using improv for caregiving. And it's a game, like, it's amazing.
So, like, the caregivers are doing improv, like.
So they do training and things that like, for example, a game that they play. You and I are going to say sentences to each other, have a conversation. Whatever I end with, my last letter of the last word that I say, you have to start your next sentence with that letter. And so we're going to kind of go back and forth and do that. But so in doing that, I have to let you finish what you're going to say. I have to really listen to it. I have to really pay attention, right? And then speak something back. And it's just all these different games that they play that just kind of, especially for somebody living with dementia, because you're just trying to enter this one moment, right? Just this reality, and just be in it with them and just live in that moment. That's what improv is. So, but even for somebody who doesn't have dementia, just somebody who's, you're not going to sit around and dream about the next 20 years of their life. You just want to sit with them and just be with them. And I'm really excited about what they're going to do, because what I get really excited about are great tools, resources, things that I can tell people about and give people. And it's a really hard space. So whenever you find something that's great, that makes me excited. And I think they're going to do really cool things with that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And just the notion of like staying on your toes with improv that makes a lot of sense. I'm taking one last attempt at putting myself in the shoes of an adult daughter who's scrolling through Instagram, trying to keep up with their kids, and also watch a funny video, stave off just the brutal, steady flow of bad news and sad stuff, and also has a parent that they love that's either suffering or that they're worried about.
Just in the back of their mind all the time.
Always in the
Right.
back of
What
their
can we
mind.
hand them that they would be like, oh, that was helpful? Yeah.
Maybe just some encouragement. I mean, you talk to that person for me.
Yeah. 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 I think the big companies own the internet. So the things that you see are these big, shiny, whatever that you feel like, oh, they're just trying to sell me something. There are smaller businesses, there are smaller people, there are things out there that are doing really excellent work. So find somebody in the senior space, wherever you live, and just ask them who's doing the good stuff. A lot of times, a great place to start is with a hospice company. Find a hospice nurse and ask them, like, what resources do you see? What are your families excited about? What new things are happening? Don't ask people, what did your grandmother do 10 years ago? Find somebody who's in the space now. Ask somebody, do you know anybody who lives in that world, and ask them what the good things are. Is there someone I can talk to or someone I can ask questions? Because in every city, there's good things. You just have to find them.
And don't make the mistake of assuming that person is a medical professional.
Correct.
There's this
They likely are not.
They're likely not. I've always found that kind of astonishing how.
Almost, yes. There's a few exceptions, but for the most part.
Yeah, the doctors and the folks that work in the medical institution, it's a different institution. It's overlapping,
right?
But they're not resource rich. They're not insight rich in terms of senior services.
But they might be able to, hopefully, if they know somebody who is.
Yeah.
Again, so you kind of, do you ever read the book Born to Buy? They talked about just our culture and marketing, and these companies back when they could do this would go to a school and go up to a kid and say, who's the coolest kid you know? And they'd say a kid, and then they'd ask, and they'd keep going until a kid finally said me. And then they'd give that kid stuff and be like, hey, tell all your friends about this stuff. So I feel like you could go to somebody and be like, who's in this space that's really great? And then they send you to someone, and they say, and then you kind of find this person, and you're like, this is the person that is able to kind of pull those things together, whether it's a geriatric care manager or a hospice nurse or, whatever, somebody who doesn't have a vested interest but is actively serving in this space, not somebody who can tell you the one experience that their grandmother had, but like who's with multiple families right now.
In the game.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's a good note.